You're too pretty to be taken seriously. That's what the court clerk said to Liana Monet the morning she tried to file an appeal that could have saved her brother's life. But Liana wasn't just another pretty face in a courtroom. She was a storm wrapped in silk, and that day, they tried to erase her. They mocked her. They beat her. They called her a liar. Then, right there in front of national cameras, her own attorney betrayed her. But what no one expected was that this 17-year-old black girl, dressed in a red jumpsuit and armed with nothing but a notebook and a spine of steel, would uncover one of the biggest court corruption scandals in the country. This is not just a story about racism. It's a story about resistance. If you believe justice should never be sold, subscribe now. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is, because this story belongs to all of us. The courtroom smelled of sweat and cheap pine polish. As the bailiff barked, "All rise," 17-year-old Liana Monet stood in the front row, her wine-red jumpsuit catching the sterile overhead lights like velvet on fire. Her curves were graceful but powerful, like a dancer trained for war. Around her, men in stiff ties and starched suits smirked as if they were at a golf tournament, not a murder trial. But Liana wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here for her brother. Devin Monet, 22, soft-eyed, protective, tattooed with his grandmother's initials across his forearm, stood shackled and straight beside his lazy public defender. Devin didn't cry. But Liana saw it. The small twitch in his jaw. The quiet flex of his fingers. He knew what was coming. Judge Barrett Voss entered the courtroom 10 seconds late and 17 years too arrogant. He didn't just walk, he loomed. His black robe fit him like armor, his gavel clutched like a threat. The courtroom silenced before he even spoke. "This court finds the defendant, Devin Ray Monet," Voss drawled in his syrup-thick southern accent, "guilty on all counts. First-degree murder. Armed robbery. Obstruction of justice." The gavel cracked. Life without parole. Liana gasped, but the courtroom didn't. It exhaled like a held breath finally released. The all-white jury didn't flinch. The prosecutor smirked. And Judge Voss? He looked right at Liana, and smiled. It wasn't a smile of justice served. It was a smile of conquest. The sound of Devin's chains echoed through the courtroom as bailiffs moved in. Liana's legs buckled, but she didn't fall. Not yet. Her manicured nails dug crescents into her palms. Her body shook with something deeper than grief, rage. Outside the courthouse, the city roared on in indifference. Sirens whined like distant dogs. A kid in a Spider-Man backpack threw a basketball at a chain-link hoop. And Liana? She walked home like a war widow, her fists clenched around her worn leather notebook, the one she'd filled for years with case law, sentencing guidelines, and escape routes. She had always known this day would come. They told her she was too pretty to be serious. Too fashionable to be respected. That beauty like hers didn't belong in law books, it belonged on billboards or behind velvet ropes. They were wrong. For 3 years, while other girls snapped selfies or danced on TikTok, Liana had buried herself in the dusty corners of East Metro Public Library. Her notebooks were inked with revenge, disguised as research. She studied statutes like scripture, watching the same system destroy boys like Devin, black, poor, resilient. She wasn't trying to be a lawyer. She was preparing for war. Back at their small 2-bedroom apartment, the silence was heavier than any sentence. Their mother lay motionless on the couch, her eyes blank, a cigarette burning between unblinking fingers. The coffee table overflowed with unpaid bills and stale takeout. Liana didn't speak. She didn't cry. She sat at the kitchen table and spread out every paper she had, Devin's arrest record, court transcripts, surveillance footage, police notes, copies of his public defender's sloppily typed case outline. She found it almost immediately. A timestamp. 9:42 p.m. A receipt from the barber shop where Devon had gotten his fade on the night of the crime. The shop was 3 miles from the gas station where the robbery happened, at 9:43. It should have exonerated him. It had been ignored. Buried. Erased. Her pulse kicked up. Liana pulled her laptop from her bag, battered, half-broken, borrowed from Miss Ray, their 45-year-old neighbor who taught music lessons down the hall. Her fingers flew. Emergency appeal. Section 33. Subsection A. Motion for post-sentencing relief. Ineffective counsel. Suppressed evidence. Racially biased jury. She didn't need Google. It was all in her head. Every technicality. Every deadline. Every weapon. The file was done by 3:17 a.m. She printed it at the FedEx on Main Street. Her heels clicked across the tile floor like war drums. The clerk behind the desk barely looked up. "This is a legal filing," she said. "Filed on behalf of Devon Ray Monet. Case number 89 to 3519. The man raised an eyebrow. "You're his lawyer?" "No," she said. "I'm his sister." By the time she slid the envelope into the courthouse mail slot, the sun had barely cracked the horizon. But she wasn't tired. She was lit from within, like a fuse. And Judge Voss? He had just lit the wrong match. The morning after the emergency filing, Liana woke to a city unchanged. Birds chirped as if justice hadn't just been mocked in broad daylight. Her phone had no missed calls, no responses from the courthouse. The silence was intentional. By 9 a.m., she was back at the marble steps of the county courthouse. She wore the same jumpsuit, pressed now, heels a little higher. Her thick curls were pulled into a sleek ponytail, lips glossed, and eyes hidden behind oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses. She didn't just walk, she arrived. Heads turned. A guard whistled. A clerk sneered. But no one said her name. She bypassed the public filing desk, ignoring the looks. She wasn't going to hand her brother's freedom to someone who still called her baby girl. Instead, she found Isaiah, a courthouse runner she knew from the neighborhood, skinny, anxious, but loyal. "Take this to Judge Voss's chambers," she whispered, pressing the manila envelope into his hand. "Don't stop. Don't speak. Just deliver it." Isaiah nodded and vanished like smoke. Liana waited outside, perched on the edge of the fountain, crossing her legs slowly as if to say, "I own this space." Minutes ticked by. The courthouse clock struck 10. Then, boom, the double doors burst open. Isaiah stumbled out, panting. 4 o'clock, he wheezed. "Emergency hearing. Voss is mad." Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She returned home to prep. The living room floor was covered in printouts, legal books, post-its, and 3 highlighters, 1 pink, 2 neon yellow. Liana worked in silence. Miss Ray peeked in and gasped at the mess. "You studying for college?" Liana looked up, fire in her stare. "I'm trying to save my brother." At 3:50, she returned to the courthouse in her sharpest look yet, navy blue jumpsuit, gold hoop earrings, and a structured black blazer cinched at the waist. Her figure turned heads. Her stare turned them away. The gallery was packed. Reporters leaned in. Court interns whispered. A few students from East Metro had come just to see her. Judge Voss entered 10 minutes late, stone-faced, dragging his robe behind him like a vulture's wings. He didn't acknowledge the press. His gaze found Liana instantly. "You have 5 minutes to amuse me, Miss Monet," he said, voice oily with contempt. "Before I hold you in contempt." Liana stepped forward. Her heels tapped sharply against the tile. "I filed an emergency motion for post-sentencing relief for Devon Ray Monet, citing ineffective counsel and suppressed alibi evidence. I have documentation, timestamps, and receipts to prove the error. The room murmured. Voss leaned back, amused. Cute. Playing dress-up with the law. You think quoting statutes makes you dangerous? Liana didn't flinch. No, she said. The truth does. She flipped open her binder to page 19. Your Honor, under Section 33.3, any evidence showing the defendant's physical impossibility of committing the crime must be reviewed. Devon was at Ace's barbershop at 9:42 p.m., documented. The crime occurred at 9:43, 3 miles away. The defense never submitted this. The jury never saw it. She slid the time-stamped receipt and witness affidavit across the table. Voss's jaw twitched. Motion granted. Temporary retrial approval. Don't celebrate yet, he growled. This isn't over. He slammed the gavel. Court adjourned. Liana turned to leave, heart hammering, but there was something in Voss's expression, not defeat, but calculation. He wasn't done. He was planning something. That night, as Liana walked home through Southside, heels in her hand and blazer draped over her arm, the lights of a cruiser flickered behind her. She turned. 2 white officers stepped out. You fit a description, one muttered, his eyes sliding over her figure like oil. What description? She asked, already knowing. One smiled. The kind that talks too loud. They slammed her into the hood. Face first. No warning. Hey, she screamed. They laughed. Got a real mouth on her. They planted a Ziploc bag in her purse, weed, crumpled, obvious. You think your fashion makes you bulletproof? One whispered in her ear. She recited her rights. Article 19. Section 15. They beat her harder. Fists, knees, elbows. A baton to the ribs. The pain was searing, blinding. Voss sends his regards. That's what the tall one said before the world went black. Liana woke up in a holding cell, nose bloody, ribs bruised, hair ripped out in patches. Miss Ray posted bail 2 hours later, storming into the precinct like a goddamn hurricane. They arrested her for what? Looking good? Back home, Liana stared into the mirror. Her lip was split. Her eye purple. Her jumpsuit torn. But the fire? Still alive. Her notebook sat on the nightstand. She reached for it with trembling fingers. Retrial was coming. But now, they weren't just trying to silence her. They were trying to erase her. The day of the retrial hearing arrived cloaked in haze. Atlanta air hung heavy with anticipation, and outside the courthouse, the crowd had doubled. Protesters held cardboard signs scrawled with slogans like, Free Liana Monet, and Voss must fall. Students, mothers, journalists, people who had never met Devon, stood united for the first time under Liana's name. But inside her chest, Liana felt a different rhythm. Not adrenaline. Dread. She stood at the courthouse entrance in a tailored ivory blazer over a fitted black turtleneck, wide-legged pants flowing with each step. Her curls were back, tamed, glossy, regal. She wasn't dressed for a trial. She was dressed for war. At her side stood Reed Holloway, the polished, sharp-jawed attorney who had appeared 2 days earlier like a savior with credentials. Early 30s, white, with tailored suits and perfect diction. He spoke like a man used to being quoted. I've been watching your case, he'd said, appearing at Miss Ray's door. What you've done is remarkable. But if you go in alone, they'll devour you. I can be co-counsel. You need someone the court respects. Miss Ray didn't trust him. Liana had hesitated too. But she needed access. She needed someone who could decode the system's inner rot. And Reed? Reed said he'd bring that, and justice. Inside the courtroom, Devon was led in, hands cuffed, orange jumpsuit wrinkled from nights sleeping upright on concrete. His eyes scanned the crowd until he found Liana. She smiled at him. Everything she'd done, every scar she wore, it was for this. Judge Voss entered with theatrical calm. His face was unreadable. He didn't look at Liana. He didn't need to. Because Reed stood. And what he said next shattered everything. Before we proceed, Your Honor, Reed began smoothly, I've submitted a preliminary review of the most recent appeal filings, and I regret to inform the court that there appear to be forgeries among the documents. The words didn't sink in at first. The gallery murmured. Devon turned, confused. Liana blinked. I'm sorry, what? She choked, rising to her feet. Reed didn't meet her eyes. The time-stamped barber shop receipt, digitally altered. The witness affidavit, metadata shows cloned signatures. We cannot allow this proceeding to be poisoned by falsified evidence. The air sucked from the room like a vacuum. Reporters erupted. Protesters outside pounded on the doors. Voss's gavel banged like a war drum. Order, he barked. Order in this court. Liana felt the floor sway. He's lying, she cried. Those files came from the court's archive. I didn't fake anything. But Reed turned to her, finally, with a look so empty it was chilling. I warned you, he said softly, loud enough for the court to hear. But you wanted to win too badly. You're lying, she whispered. You said. Enough, Voss thundered. All motions filed by Miss Monet are hereby suspended. The retrial is paused indefinitely. Guards, remove her from this courtroom. No. Devon shouted. They played you, Liana. They set you up. But the guards had already moved. Two white officers, the same ones who dragged her into a precinct cell just days earlier, grabbed her by the arms. One ripped her notebook from her hand. The gallery gasped. Zara Bennett, the journalist who had followed Liana's story since day one, tried to stand. She's being silenced, she cried. This is a setup. They shoved Liana out of the courtroom, cameras flashing. Her lipstick smeared, her blazer wrinkled. She wasn't just being removed. She was being erased. Outside, the protests boiled. Screams erupted. Let her speak. Justice for Liana. But the damage was done. Inside, Voss smirked as he whispered to his clerk. Reed adjusted his tie. Devon stood, fists clenched so tight his wrists bled under the cuffs. The courtroom, the one Liana had thought she could break, had swallowed her whole. And that night, when she collapsed onto Miss Ray's couch, bruised and silent, she understood what had happened. Reed wasn't a stranger. He was Voss's godson. She found the connection buried in a newspaper archive, a photo of Voss attending Reed's law school graduation, hand on his shoulder like a proud father. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. They'd baited her. Used her beauty, her rage, her hunger for justice. Then gutted her in the spotlight. But they'd forgotten one thing. Liana Monet was still standing. And she wasn't done. The night after the betrayal, the city felt colder. Liana sat on Miss Ray's floor, knees hugged to her chest, her notebook torn and dirty beside her. The same notebook she'd clutched in every courtroom, every step of the way, now useless. Or so it seemed. On every news channel, her face played on loop. Teen legal activist accused of fraud. Commentators speculated. Some ridiculed. Others defended her. But no one asked her. Devon was still in prison. Voss was still on the bench. And Liana? She was the villain now. But at 2:41 a.m., the world flipped. An anonymous post dropped on a federal whistleblower site known for exposing corrupt mayors and police chiefs. The title read, "The Voss Archive." What followed was a digital flood. Screenshots. Wire transfers. Court transcripts with forged edits. Secret memos between judges and prison executives. Audio files. Photos. Signatures. Liana sat frozen as the data scrolled down her screen like a horror story typed in real time. Judge Barrett Voss had sentenced over 300 black youth to specific for-profit facilities, each tied to private investors, each with financial kickbacks. Devon's name appeared 12 times. Once in an internal memo labeled, "High Retention Candidate." Once beside a $10,000 wire transfer logged 2 days after his verdict. And once, worst of all, in a chain of emails coordinating sentencing quotas between Voss and a warden named S. Harrell. Liana's hands trembled. She hadn't been crazy. She'd been right. They hadn't ruined her appeal because it was false. They ruined it because it was dangerous. By dawn, #VossPipeline trended in 3 countries. Protests reignited across Atlanta, then Detroit, then Baltimore. Local leaders called for investigation. Federal prosecutors launched inquiries. Civil rights lawyers demanded Voss be suspended. And in the center of the maelstrom, Liana. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't post a tweet. She didn't record a video. She watched. She watched as her enemy's castle burned, not from her motion, but from his own receipts. Zara Bennett reached out first. "I have footage," she messaged. "Not just of the hearing. I've got the precinct video from when they arrested you. The bruises. The weed bag." She sent a clip. It showed one of the officers clearly dropping the Ziploc in Liana's purse. It showed the baton strike. It showed everything. Zara uploaded a 3-minute supercut, "Courtroom betrayal, precinct brutality," Liana's raw, silent face walking free with broken lips and fury in her eyes. The video shattered the internet. By noon, the DA's office issued a statement calling for a criminal review of all Voss's past rulings. By sunset, the mayor ordered temporary court closures, pending investigation. And just as Liana stood at her window, still stunned, there was a knock at Miss Ray's door. A woman stood outside, mid-40s, black, trench coat, no visible badge. But the energy? Federal. "I'm Maya Ellington," she said. "Department of Justice. We need to talk. And we need your help." Liana stared. "You got him?" Maya nodded. "Voss is in custody. But we need a testimony. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried, figuratively and maybe literally." Liana looked down at her ruined notebook. "No one's gonna believe me. Not after what they did." Maya smiled, just faintly. "Everyone believes you now." That afternoon, Maya brought her to a federal facility downtown. Outside, protesters gathered, press circled, the air thick with smoke and chants. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. The hearing room had no jury. Just a judge, some agents, and a row of defense attorneys with cold eyes. Voss sat at the end of the table, cuffed, pale, but still smug. Liana stepped up to the witness box. She wore black, head to toe. Her hair slicked back. Her face bare. Her voice low. "My name is Liana Monet," she began, "and I'm here to tell you what they never wanted heard." She laid it all out, the corrupted court system, the forged documents, the appeal suppression, the beatings, the betrayal. She backed it up with audio. With screenshots. With her scars. And then she said it. Justice doesn't live in this building. It lives out there, in the people who screamed my name when they dragged me away. In the ones who read the leaks and didn't scroll past. In the kids who haven't been sentenced yet. The room fell still. Voss didn't blink. But his jaw clenched. "I was a teenage girl in a jumpsuit with a notebook," she said. "And I still burned your empire." The judge nodded once. "Proceed with indictment." As agents moved toward Voss, he stood. "You think this ends with me?" he hissed. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Liana met his stare. "Then I'll dig." 2 days later, the city looked like a wound. Helicopters circled overhead. Riot vans rolled through downtown like tanks. The courthouse steps were still stained with glass and blood. Protesters hadn't left. If anything, their numbers had swelled. The world wasn't watching anymore, it was shouting. But Liana wasn't shouting. She was preparing. She sat in Miss Ray's kitchen, legs crossed under her, laptop open, flash drive loaded with hundreds of leaked files, evidence of corruption not just in Voss's court but in 2 neighboring districts. She barely slept. She didn't eat. Her voice was still hoarse from the last testimony, and her ribs ached every time she inhaled too sharply. Devon was still behind bars. And Voss? Voss had whispered a name at the end of his indictment hearing, Harold. She'd heard it. Maya Ellington had too. That name appeared in 17 emails in the Voss archive. It linked a group of wardens, judges, and private equity partners who'd built a prison funneling system worth millions. Kids like Devon weren't just casualties. They were currency. At 6:12 a.m., another knock came at the door. Miss Ray opened it with a kitchen knife in hand, but the woman outside just raised a hand calmly. She wore a dark jacket with a gold lapel pin, U.S. Attorney General's office. "We've got something," she said to Liana. "A federal grand jury wants to hear your full testimony." Liana nodded. "I want Devon in that room." "Already arranged." The federal courtroom was pristine. White walls, bulletproof glass, leather-bound seats that still creaked like secrets. There were no flashing cameras here, no protest signs, no chaos. Just a panel of 12 stone-faced jurors, a federal judge, and one teenage girl walking in with a flash drive in one hand and a truth sharper than any sword. Devon was there, escorted and under protection, no chains, just disbelief in his eyes. He hadn't seen Liana since the betrayal. He stood when she entered. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just nodded once, like a soldier acknowledging her general. Then she walked to the center. "My name is Liana Monet," she said. "I'm 17 years old. And I have evidence that this court, this country, has failed kids like my brother for decades." She played recordings. She showed documents. She pointed to transfers and signatures and code words like retention strength, used to rate incarcerated youth based on profitability. Then she turned to Devon. "He worked 2 jobs to support my mom and me. He missed prom. He missed graduation. He missed living. And you took that, not because he did anything wrong, but because a white man in robes decided he could." She turned to the jury. "I don't want pity. I want fire. I want what every white teenager with a trust fund and a minor possession charge walks out with, mercy. But more than that. I want justice for everyone whose names weren't loud enough to make it to this room." A pause. "I want you to know that I forgive none of them. Not the judge. Not the cops. Not Reed Holloway. Because forgiveness isn't what they earned." Her voice cracked, but didn't break. "They earned consequence." The room stood still for what felt like hours. Then the judge looked at the jury. A nod. The ruling came faster than she expected. Devon Monet is to be released immediately pending exoneration. All charges vacated. Records to be expunged. The Department of Justice will pursue charges against Judge Barrett Voss, Warden Samuel Harrell, and all named in the Voss archive. Liana exhaled for the first time in what felt like a century. Devon walked to her. No cuffs. No guards. Just him. He opened his arms. She didn't hesitate. They embraced in the middle of that sterile courtroom, 2 survivors in a war zone made of law books and marble floors. Outside, the crowd erupted. Zara Bennett was live on every major stream. Protest signs turned to celebration. Devon is free trended globally. Artists painted murals of Liana on school walls. Kids started calling her Justice Girl. A scholarship fund was launched in her name. But she didn't smile, not fully. Because Voss was still out there. Somewhere. Hidden. But not gone. And the deeper conspiracy he hinted at? She would find it. She would name it. She would burn it down. One file at a time. One name at a time. With the same notebook in her hand. Because Liana Monet had already faced the devil. And she still had fire to give. In a world that often silences the young, the poor, or the underestimated, Liana Monet's story is a defiant reminder that truth doesn't ask permission to speak, it demands to be heard. Her journey from courtroom betrayal to national reckoning shows us that justice isn't a gift handed down from power. It's a fire lit by those brave enough to fight for it. Even in the face of beatings, humiliation, and public betrayal, Liana didn't give up. She stood taller. She studied harder. And when they tried to bury her, she rose from beneath the rubble of their lies, carrying not just her brother's hope, but the hope of hundreds. Courage, as Maya Angelou once wrote, is the most important of all the virtues because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. If this story moved you, leave a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is, because truth doesn't live in silence. It lives in us. Like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe justice should never depend on status, wealth, or skin color. Let the world know, we're still watching.